Hello, hello. Buenos dias. How are you guys doing today? Braden's doing amazing. All right, let me try that again. How are you guys doing today? Hey, well, welcome. My name is Stephanie Moncada. I'm the Interim Associate Chaplain and Diversity Officer here on campus. And I do see some new faces in the crowd. Welcome to our Peacemakers Convocation. And thank you for joining us, both students and new individuals. If you guys remember, last September, we had Hispanic Heritage Month, and we had a great response from students on the videos and the student spotlights that we did during that month. So we decided to continue those for Black History Month. And for this month, we chose 5 SC individuals to share their unique stories and experiences with you. And we hope and pray that you can be an active listener and exercise compassion as we learn to grow together through these stories, and knowing that many of these stories are actually really fun, and some of them will be a little bit more challenging, but they will be challenging to you, and we hope that it challenges you to change the way you treat the saints and image bearers around you. So we're excited again that we're able to kick that off for this month, and let's check out our first video.
I never like seen somebody like embrace the African American culture before here on campus, and that's just my experience per se. I'd say like per the outside world, my view, a lot of times I see people take on the African American experience, but when it comes time to talk about our issues or talk about a issue, they kind of like push it off to the side. I've heard some people on the campus who are not black say the N-word. And I had to mention that's not an okay thing to say. It's very uncomfortable and kind of very disrespectful when I hear someone say that when they are not part of like my culture. It's many things that Sterling can do. I would say try to be a little bit more diverse when it comes like to picking staff, whether it be like the coaching departments or just even be teachers. I would also say maybe institute an African American history class for a semester and see how it goes. I would say for the history part that you just can't dwindle it down to a few people. It's over a culmination of, if not decades, and at least over a 400 period of time. You just can't boil it down to Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. There's also Marcus Garvey, Fred Hampton, Thurgood Marshall. So it's many other people who paved the way for where we are today. It stems from my grandmother, who worked for the NAACP for 20 years. Just prideful in being black and not being ashamed for who we are. I get that we have our own issues that we deal with, but overall, she said we came a long way and should be proud for that, how long that we came. My name is William Thomas, and what makes me black is my love for hip-hop music. No problem.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving William a hand and recognizing the beauty of his honesty in that story. I'm really glad that William took the courageous step to be honest, because it's actually impossible to move forward in any arena without honesty. And while facing that honesty can be hard to do in the realm of racial justice, it is still necessary. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the videos that we have scheduled for this month, and hopefully you are too. I'm grateful for William's honesty. I'm also grateful for how Stephanie, in her role as Interim Associate Chaplain and Diversity Officer, has led us forward in honesty over the course of this school year in a variety of different ways. But I don't want us to forget the seeds of work that were happening in this arena years before now. Seeds like what we are gathered here together for today. This is the eighth annual Peacemakers Convocation. And since its inception in 2015, the Peacemakers Convocation has sought to highlight speakers who are engaged as peacemakers themselves in the important field of racial justice. And just as a reminder, the field of racial justice is important because it is close, first and foremost, to God's heart. Diversity was God's idea, and the whole scope and the whole movement of Scripture paints a stunning portrait of God's plan for amazing diversity that we can hardly ever imagine, combined with unparalleled unity and love. That is God's vision for a diverse world, for His diverse world. And yet, as we all well know, God's world is currently not as it ought to be. God's world is currently deeply broken, and far, far, far too often, instead of perfect unity, we instead see disunity brought about by injustice. Thus, the important work of engaging on God's terms and in God's way, the work of racial justice. And thus, the Peacemaker's Convocation, again, started in 2015 as a seed of this vital work here at Sterling College. It's not everything, but we do believe that this convocation, held annually on the first Friday in February, is one important piece of that puzzle for our community here in little old Sterling, Kansas. And today's guest speaker, today's guest lecturer, stands squarely in the excellent tradition of the first 7 Peacemakers convocations. DeLano J. Sheffield is a Kansas native who was born and grew up in Topeka. He attended the University of Kansas. Do we have some cheers or boos? I don't know. Rock chalk. Ethan, right down front. DeLano attended the University of Kansas, where he studied architectural engineering. He resides currently in Kansas City and was a longtime structural engineer for the company Blue Scope Steel in Kansas City. DeLano has also served as a discipleship pastor in the local church and a network leader for Pastors Network Made to Flourish. He has served as an adjunct professor of Greek at a school in Kansas City and as an online adjunct instructor at none other than right here at Sterling College. That's right, DeLano is already part of the Warrior family. He's currently pursuing his doctorate of ministry at Fuller Seminary in Pasadena, California. And while he is doing this, he also splits his vocational time between coaching executives for the Department of Human Services for the state of Oregon in the matters of diversity, equity, inclusivity, and accessibility. And he also provides business coaching for the Artemis Group of Goodwill in western Missouri and eastern Kansas. Please, let's give DeLano a warm Warrior family welcome.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? I'm told that you all get double credits for being here this morning, and I'm giving 2-for-1 credits for those who have at least 10 pages of notes. I'm kidding. So in the early 2000s, my father, Harold Sheffield Sr., came to Kansas City, and I took him to the newly remodeled Union Station. And he hadn't been there in almost over 50 years since he was a kid. But as he walked through, I got a glimpse of what my father looked like as a child as he meandered through the building with this uncanny smile on his face. He made his way to this diner called the Harvey House, which he had also been restored. And he told me this story about his grandmother, or my grandmother, excuse me. He said that as a child he went, but they weren't allowed to buy food. And my grandmother would slip around to the back of the building and find a way to purchase burgers from the restaurant. And I've heard some similar experiences from others, and I've often wondered why, at the very least, why anyone would want to withhold a burger from someone that they could sell it to. What is a person's belief about burgers, or really, what is a person's belief about people who are different to decide to not sell them a burger? Or more than that, what does it say about us that a person would say, well, you can eat these burgers, but you need to come to the back to get them? Now, some who are detached might conclude, well, at least they got a burger, DeLano. It's just a different door. And therein lies the issue or the question that we have to answer with respect to burgers. And not just burgers that we're talking about. We haven't even talked about education or seats or jobs or banks or pulpits and housing and drinking fountains. Pre-COVID, nobody drinks from drinking fountains anymore. What is required of one's neighbor for basic human dignity? You all got a great unpacking from the Micah text from East Stephanie's sermon a few weeks ago, and she saved me some time on the exegesis and background. So I want to lean into some thoughts about the result of that text. You know, based on our experiences, we get these reminders about how peacemaking is a continual work, and therefore a discipline that we are all growing in. My uncle was a lawyer and the first African-American federal district judge in Richmond, Virginia since the Reconstruction era. I grew up around the Brown family of Brown versus the Board of Education. I attended the same church as them. And my mother was the first African-American teacher to ground me. So some accomplishments have a great way of reminding us that something was not right before that moment in time. And we know this is true because we serve and live in a kingdom that is already, but has a lot of not yet. My aunt was the first African-American nurse in a Kansas public school because before that, there were black nurses, but they weren't allowed to work in public schools. If there is a first, we have to ask what it was like before then. And if there was a first time possible, we have to remember that progress is not the same as arrival. So we're a gospel-focused people, right? We understand that dignity and doing our best to care for others is not an ancillary issue. But quite honestly, we forget about that. In all our pressing calendar reminders and our fast-paced, results-driven society where productivity is king and often how we determine flourishing, we forget that under that success and achievement and how long it's been since your last failure are these fundamental questions about what it means to be human. What does it mean to love and follow God? What keeps us from being justice, love, and mercy humbly driven people? Especially to those who don't look like us. You know, ideas have hands and feet. I do not need to ask you if you value oxygen. I merely only need to watch your chest move. If I watched you for hours and saw your chest moving, I would quickly conclude that your value of oxygen is not ancillary. Breathing, regardless of whatever else it is you have to do, is paramount to whatever else it is you have to do. Equity and peacemaking and racial reconciliation and justice and mercy and humility are great ideas, but there is a different type of living, a different kind of breathing that happens when they're not ancillary values. If someone looked at your life from outer space, they could only see your life. Would they see that part of society that you engage in and conclude without hearing a word you spoke that you are someone who espouses a life of learning to be equitable, to make peace, doing justice and mercy and humility, etc., to all cultures and people? Perhaps you are, and for that, that's great. You've arrived. Fold up your notes, go and bless the Lord. Thanks be to God. But for the rest of us, like you, like me, we need these reminders. We need to keep learning to do a little better every day. And perhaps you need this reminder for yourself too. You know, I think there's numerous antagonists that happen to this. These opposers to life of peacemaking but there's three in particular I want to focus on this morning because I really think they're important, not just because I'm speaking. I think they're important because they are countered by so many fundamental aspects of the gospel. What keeps me or you from being a person who embodies peacemaking, racial reconciliation, and striving for justice, loving mercy, walking humbly? What antagonists keep me from these ideas being in my hands and feet? The first one is an indifference to history. When I was younger, I used to quietly dread history, and I say quietly because my father taught history before he was a principal. And I took this U.S. history course, and the professor gave some truths I had heard of in the past, but something was very different about his approach. He had a knack for really drawing light that these were people involved in this history. And not all the same types of people or groups. It wasn't homogeneous individuals. The stories in this U.S. history took on value because the people took on value to me. When we do not have a value in people, we simultaneously don't hold value in their history. And when there is no value in their history, we typically default to two options. That indifference will either result in one, we attempt to get people to assimilate to our own values and history devoid of a context, irrespective of theirs, or two, and perhaps worse in some ways, we simply just don't care at all. Both of these stymies progress and sends all kinds of messages about who can be valued, who has say, who has the right to contribute, who does not, what life is about, who loves God and who doesn't, who God loves and who's just being punished by him, and what it means to be human. The antagonizer makes us indifferent to history, and the remedy is compassion. You must care about the story of other people as least as much as you care about your own story, because it's hard to be helped, or really to help others, when you've already concluded that you know what's best in their circumstances. Context determines the type of compassion, just like context determines the meaning of Scripture. This is why Paul uses over 40 building terms to the Ephesians who take great pride in their architecture. And it's why he speaks of God's impartial judicial administration to those Romans who spent a lot of time in courtrooms. And it is why the Galileans can't get over Jesus being a carpenter, but today we forget that he did carpentry much longer than he did ministry. You have to care about where people come from because their experiences and their stories and what they have to say are of great, great value to you. We have to care about our collective histories because, as my mother would say, if you don't learn it, you're doomed to repeat it. We have to care because it's hard to remember something that you have not learned. And remembering is really a gospel fundamental. Rooted right in the ordinances of the church, of the Christian church, is the value of history and the principle and joy of remembering. At a table for eating, which is in itself tells us what is common to humanity is to thirst and to hunger, Jesus gathers his disciples together. He instills this reminder that remembering is tied to the gospel. He says, as often as you do this, future, do this present in remembrance of me, the past. He takes the past, present, and future and wraps it together in one moment and reminds us in this Passion Week that we should live lives of compassion. We must be a people who are not indifferent to history or antagonistic or defensive or frail when the stories rub up against our comforts, but rather with gracious ears, we let the present moment be seen in light of what has happened. And we can do this without losing hope because we know that the gospel tells us where we're headed. The second antagonistic problem that we have to deal with is that we're oblivious to the truth. It is difficult to be disconnected from good or bad things of the present when we have a recognition of the past. Truth marches on. And not only the transcendent truth of God, but also the events and experiences that truly have happened. My brother was in the Army, and he served in the Middle East during the first war with Iraq. And there was a period of time where we didn't hear from him as he was getting close to the end of his term. And I began to get worried if he was okay. And one day I heard this car in the driveway pull up, and I knew that it was his car. I did not need to look out the window to know. I immediately began to celebrate because I knew that he was home. Now, if I was oblivious to the sound, if I didn't care to listen, I would have missed the implications of the truth that my brother was home. Now, notice this. It would not have made it any less true if I did not engage with the hearing, if I didn't listen or look for the right sights and sounds coming out through the window. I would have just missed out. And sin is a lot of things, one of which is that it is sticky, and it pushes our scarcity and zero-sum mentality to the point of becoming an idol. It sticks to everything. In Genesis 3, it stuck to the ground, making it curse. It stuck to fig leaves. In chapter 4, it's going to stick to offerings. In chapter 11, it's going to stick to a building development project. In all these cases, there's a scarcity mentality, and the result in all those is this attempt to cover. There'll be a scarcity of God's grace, so Adam has to cover himself with fig leaves. There's a scarcity in offerings, so Cain has to kill his brother. There's not enough protection for Cain, so Cain needs a seal. There's not enough notoriety for the Babel citizens, so they go on this endeavor to build this skyscraper, mud scraper, really. And this is all the beginning of humanity dealing with sin and scarcity. Soon, tribes will be at odds with each other, and families from every type of group with the name Ite will be an enemy to each other. Our defensiveness rises when truth rubs against our perceived security. In a fallen world, we have numerous scriptures that demonstrate our ability to remain unaware to the differences of people around us. And guess what? Race is one of those differences. And the result of discrimination is usually that someone gets left out, someone gets judged, someone's condemned, and in many cases, they're left without the bare necessities that others have. It is very difficult to get justice when we are oblivious to the truth. Dr. Roberts is my mentor and senior strategist at the Dupree Center of Fuller Seminary. He defines justice this way. Look at this, and I think it's up on the overhead. Biblical justice ensures that all people receive their due as beings created in God's image, called to obey God's will and embraced by God's merciful love. Biblical justice is grounded on the just and gracious character and activity of God and shaped by God's revelation in Scripture and, supremely, in Jesus Christ. Biblical justice, whether legal or social, is expressed in right relationships and embodied in right structures, with special attention given to those in society least likely to be treated justly. Biblical justice, the ground floor of God's shalom, reconciles what's divided, makes right what is wrong, and enables all people to flourish. Let me circle back on that last part so we're not oblivious to it. Biblical justice, whether legal or social, is expressed in right relationships and embodied in right structures, with special attention given to those in society least likely to be treated justly. Biblical justice, the ground floor of God's shalom, reconciles what's divided, makes right what is wrong, and enables all people to flourish. The culprit to a lack of peacemaking is to be oblivious to the truth. The remedy is a robust view of the gospel where Jesus Christ is truly reconciling all things back to himself, not to us. Where we're not only seeing those words that we've seen in the hymn, no more let sins and sorrow grow, nor thorns infest the ground. He comes to make his blessing flow as far as the curse is found. But we go looking for understanding on how far the curse is gone, and we go looking to extend truth and grace and mercy. It is a robust gospel where in the kingdom there is literally enough, so I don't need to rob others to preserve my own identity, and where my flourishing is quite possibly dependent on other people's flourishing also, especially to those who don't look like me. The third antagonizer is a myopic view of mercy. Just to recap, peacemaking is stymied when someone has, number one, an indifference to history. Number two is oblivious to the truth. And lastly, we have a myopic view of grace and mercy. I'm always astonished at the text in Luke 19 where Jesus approaches the city of Jerusalem, and because we know he's all-knowing, he knows just what he's looking at and the immediate circumstances. And he's not indifferent to history, nor oblivious to truth. He understands what he's looking at, and Luke says as he approaches the city that he wept over it, sees the city, knows the history, knows all the backdrop of what's happened, and in that moment, overwhelmed by what he sees and knows has happened up to that moment and what is happening then and there, our Savior weeps over the city. Because he cares, he says in verse 42, if you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. What is intriguing about this is he knows their history. He's not oblivious to the truth or the truth of their circumstances, and he recognizes that they're myopic. They don't see the wide picture of what's happening. They don't see it properly. And instead of walking into the city to destroy it, he essentially walks into the city to be destroyed. If we understand the kind of mercy and gracious eyes that God looks at us with in this very moment, it's very difficult to withhold grace and mercy from others. What is more, God is not withholding mercy from us who do wrong every day. Yet we withhold mercy from others who've done nothing wrong by simply having a different color. What am I saying? Your ability to be an active and maybe even soundless advocate for peacemaking and racial reconciliation is going to be particularly based on a compassion for other people's history, a robust view of this gospel, and a clear perspective of the gracious eyes that you are looked at in this very moment. Because the conclusion is not merely to know some great facts about African Americans or Native Americans or Asian Americans or Caucasian Americans or women. To know some great facts about it is great, or some people who don't look like you is great, but it is to actively engage in living this question of what would God ask of you that you cannot do on your own? To weep over injustice, but then also to walk inside the city. I love King as much as everybody. Everybody like Martin Luther King? It's kind of quiet. A little worried about that. All right, just playing. But I love his mentor. I'm a big proponent of, we see somebody who's solid, want to know their history before their history. Who's King's mentor? And one of them was Howard Thurman. He states in Footprints of a Dream, the story of church for the fellowship of all peoples. This quote, I think, really gets at it. The movement of the Spirit and a Spirit of God in the hearts of men and women often calls them to act against the spirit of their times, or causes them to anticipate a spirit which is yet in the making. In a moment of dedication, they are given wisdom and courage to dare a deed that challenges and to kindle a hope that inspires. When's the last time you had to be courageous? When's the last conversation where you had to be courageous? And maybe hear some things that you didn't necessarily want to hear, but you had to embrace them as being true. Where you weren't worried about your identity because you know that it's secure in Christ. Where you were able to say what you know needed to be said, but also to be able to hear things that maybe were a little difficult to hear. Well, why does that matter? Why this act of kindling hope? If Christ, and we believe this to be true, is indeed reconciling all things, and our ability to see each other with the dignity that we deserve is being resolved, and if Christ was actually serious when he told the first disciples that you're going to do even greater works than I did, then guess what? Your degree in business, or sports management, or athletic training, or education is far more important than you could have ever imagined. Great, you're going into those degrees. That work is especially important, but how does that fit in what God wants you to do in the cosmic story of what God's accomplishing? I really believe Sterling is not preparing people just for the pews. I believe they're developing creative and thoughtful leaders who understand a maturing faith. It may be that your first step to truth is that you're going to recognize that your whole life you will have these opportunities to engage with people who don't look like you, who don't have the same background as you, who don't have the economic background you have, who don't have the same story, may not be from the same country, may not be the same height as you are. Some of you all might not be as tall as me someday, right? But the fact of the matter is, these moments can be especially valuable when you recognize that it's no coincidence in God's grand story that you cross paths with them. And guess what? Difference does not have to mean that they are a problem or need to be like you to be valued. While you're here and when you graduate, the thoughtfulness should be, how am I using these moments to bring together the way God wants them to be? How am I using these moments to bring things together the way God intends them to be? It is not sufficient to get the grade and complete the program, to get the great job, to move on to your next steps and goals. That's great. But how does this fit into God's justice? So Harold Sheffield walks into Harvey's, and we sat down and we got a burger. It was great. It was a really good burger. It's not the best burger place in Kansas City, but it was pretty good. That's great, right? That's progress. That's a good thing. Not so fast. Not so fast. Are we sufficient with the progress to walk in the front door and eat a burger? Is that really enough? My dad could go in now after waiting 50 years and knowing the experience of having to go to the back to get a burger that comes off the same skillet. Is that enough? What if Harvey's at Union Station could have been Harold's at Union Station? I would have got discounts, if nothing else. It would have been good for that reason. The truth is, but for a lot of reasons, a lot of economic reasons and other things, he's not sufficient to get a loan at the bank at the same rate and draw the same clientele that Harvey did. And the fact of the matter is, you have privilege. All of us have some privilege. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to talk about grace. But you have privilege to put other people in a position to flourish like you are, especially those who don't look like you. It might be that their flourishing leads to your flourishing. But if you don't see the city, you're going to miss out. It's great to weep over the things around us, and we should sometimes. We should take that pause and that Sabbath moment to look at what we see around us and to be overwhelmed with what's happening and weep over it. It's great to weep over those things. But amid and after the weeping, we look with gracious eyes, and then it's time to move. It is understandable to be tired or overwhelmed by the things that we see that seem to be insurmountable. We indeed are full of frailties and fallibilities. We can fail, but we can still ask, what is justice? And maybe we don't have all the answers, but we do know the one who does, right? And God tends to impartially open doors and provide gifts to those who habitually knock, seek, and ask for the things that he values. So you're not going to know how to solve every circumstance. You may not have the solution to removing redlining laws that are still on the books in a lot of cities today, or creating better recruiting practices or hiring practices, or know how to fix food deserts or predatory lending or other things that happen around us that we see. You may not have all the solutions to that, but you have to admit that you are there in that moment and in that time. And if you are in that moment in time, you play a part in it. And you can remember that those issues exist every day. They're there every day. Even if you don't recognize it, they're still there. And the fact of the matter is, you can care about the relevance of it, even if it doesn't affect you directly. So we learn that we should be learning each moment, in every way, in all of our privilege, what does it look like to ensure that the person next to me receives their due as human? What does it mean to bestow dignity on a person when I go to the restaurant? What does it mean if I get the job in a position to help others to maybe be able to have that same kind of work? What does it mean when I get extra? What do I do with that? How do I become a person, as Paul said, that the comfort that we receive, we comfort others with the same comfort we've received from God? How can I do right by the person who is there? Asking those kind of questions, remove ourselves from becoming indifferent to history, oblivious to truth, recognizing the grace that and mercy we receive that right now. And we make the decision to go. And we just go. Thank you.
For this next part, we're actually going to enter into a Q&A. DeLano, thank you so much for everything that you just shared.
Thank you.
From what I'm hearing, definitely it's more of a call to not let injustices become white noise around us, but for us to tune into those injustices and tune into the people around us who are the saints and image bearers that come from so many different things. And so we cannot afford the white noise. So thank you so much for sharing that. I do have a couple of questions that just following up from what you just shared. What are some potential future and present consequences we may face if we act indifferently towards injustice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a reminder as the church that we don't solely hold all the answers, but we definitely know the one who does. And so when we choose to disengage from the things that we see going on around us on any capacity, it could be about race, it could be about misunderstandings about people, it could be systems, it could be economics. We're essentially leaving the rest of the world to depend on common grace to come up with those answers, where we know the one who's in control of it. And a lot of times it doesn't mean we'll lose our voice completely because we know God is in control. But our footing has been kind of displaced. And so it's important for us to not be indifferent, because we're the ones who should be espousing that loudest message that, hey, there's something better about this. It's that redemptive kind of perspective that we're supposed to have. And, we talked about, the cross is a great example. Most humiliating way to die. And it would be embarrassing, right? There's a curse for someone who dies on a cross. We serve the Savior who looked at that and said, I can do something with that, right? And as Christians, then, there's nothing that we should look at in this world and say, there's nothing that can be done about it. Now, we may not have all the answers, but when we check out of that, we usually get distracted and other things become very important. And that's just not the life that we're called to live.
That's so good. Thank you so much. You talked about common grace. And so I think even as students here, when we think about injustices, we do say, someone else is going to take care of it. So what are some practical things that us in our role, even here, thinking that someone else can take care of it. What can we do right now, especially at this age, knowing that injustices do happen even among us? What can we do, and what are some practical steps for us to kind of engage in and be aware of?
Yeah, I think that's important. Is remembering who's not at the seats, who's not at the seat, who has a space to be able to speak. I coach execs, and a number of times that question comes up. People like, how do I get more active in this? I'm, a Caucasian American. I see this as being an injustice. I want to make sure that I'm doing my job and participating. People who are of color are saying, I'm tired. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm worn out. I'm tired of being the one who has to speak first. For both, it's this reminder that it's a discipline, right? We have to become disciplined in all parts of what God is redeeming. And so remaining active sometimes is just asking those questions. Who's missing? And what can I do with my power, my influence, to make sure that we pull up those people who don't have a voice? Because, again, nobody holds the corner on all that's needed to be done. But we're never going to arrive there if we don't let everybody have a space to speak. I'm an engineer by trade. The way we learn how to design buildings is you rotate that building. You look at it from every angle. You flip it over, and you look at the breaking points. And it's the same thing in life. There's all these failure mechanisms. If we don't rotate and look around it, we'll never find all those failure points, and you can't do that alone. So we need every woman, every person of color, every person who's Caucasian, every background, every experience, to be able to say what they see it as. And when we do that, that starts to sound like corporate body life, which is what we're supposed to be in the church anyway.
Amen. That's so powerful. And I want to emphasize the discipline that takes. It's a habit to enact justice.
Yeah.
And starting now, I mean, it's if you didn't know before, you know now, and it's hard to be the person and be ignorant to what you just learned.
Yeah.
We got to do something with what we've learned today in this moment. So
So just real quick, practically speaking, in classrooms, you're studying, you're working with teachers, you're thinking about the classes and the things you're learning. Who's missing? You go to the store, every interaction with somebody different. Those are places that it's in the regular day-to-day breathing of life that you have these moments to engage with people that are different with you. And you have to really ask in that moment, because Christ is doing it as well. He's presented us to other people, and he's saying, what are you going to do with it?
That's so good. How can both minority and majority culture avoid exhibiting complicity or becoming insular? And what system or symptoms should we be aware of? So in other words, how do we know we're enacting indifference towards injustices and people around us, and how does it manifest itself?
Yeah, this was a difficult one for me, especially as I started to coach. I realized that injustice it builds momentum. It's like a ball rolling down a hill, and so it's one thing to acknowledge it and see it's rolling, but the problem is it's still rolling. The only way that's fixed is to stop it, and it doesn't stop on its own. I can yell at a ball all day, stop it. I don't have that authority. We wish that we could be like Jesus and yell at meteorology to get it right. But it just doesn't work that way. Otherwise, it wouldn't have snowed last week or a few days ago. It would have been warmer here. But so we have to get involved in that, and sometimes we have to get in the way of things that are not right. But that starts to sound like sacrifice and counting the cost and tension of me being comfortable and others maybe succeeding on me being uncomfortable, and that sounds like discipleship. So yeah, I think my learning that I'm complicit in some cases, and maybe it's my being worn out. It's difficult, and people of color, you know the experiences sometimes, just walking in stores and having that flex moment of thinking, who's looking at me? Let me make sure I'm not doing anything incorrect, that kind of thing. That can wear you out. But in that, as a person of color, I can't become complicit by maintaining the status quo, and sometimes I'm going to have to speak up. And what I want and hope for is my white brothers and sisters to do the same thing, right? And it's sometimes we have to speak alone, but again, corporate body life calls us together. So this is not something that we really have to do alone. It's just the church has to decide that this is of great value.
That's so good. I love what you just said surrounding the sacrifice that it takes for us to stop injustice. And there is a risk of losing. There's a cost of losing things that are important to us or that we think are important. But that's the way of following Jesus.
Yeah.
losing the things that matter to this world in order to gain it all. And so that's beautiful. For our brothers and sisters that are in the room that don't know what complicit means, can you quickly define that?
And I don't hold a whole hard definition. That's a good one, though. If we're contributing, and sometimes we feel like we're not contributing because we haven't actively done something to bring about injustice. I'm not responsible for predatory lending. I'm not responsible for the fact that if you look at economically how some rates for certain people in certain areas, I didn't have anything to do with that, or why insurance premiums vary by zip code. I didn't do any of that. But if you're in a position of privilege, and all of us as believers, all of us as individuals have privilege, and we don't use that to steward it, to work against injustice, we're contributing to that ball rolling down the hill because we're allowing it to continue. And again, it really becomes this question of what did he give me and what am I doing with it, right? And the issue is if it's zero sum, then I got to hold on to it because I think this may be it. But if I have nothing to lose, I'm learning to become a person who willingly gives against injustice, against things that we see around us because I have nothing to lose. My identity is wrapped in Christ.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And I hope that we are able to remind ourselves that we do have nothing to lose because we've already gained it all. And so that's beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. And would you mind ending us on a benediction at this moment?
Sure. Let's pray. God, I want to say thank you first and just this time for us to be together, to gather as believers who are learning. We are learning what it means to follow your Son. And we thank you for the fact that he is the truth and is the way and the life, but he also demonstrated what this life is going to look like as we become conformed to his image. Thank you that it is something that you have not given up on and that you engage with us in our growing. And I pray and I leave this blessing with every student, every professor, every administrator who's here, as we go from this place, both weeping and rejoicing into our respective vocations. I pray that you will remind each of us that you are truly Emmanuel, and that's not just a title, that you go with us and you are going before us as well. Help us to see the things that we need to see with gracious eyes, to see truth the way that it needs to be seen and not to be oblivious to it. And bless every heart and soul as we head from this place, to be a blessing to every heart and soul that they engage with. Amen.
And thank you so much. And again, knowing that Jesus talks about that, it's not just about us, it's actually about everyone around us. Thank you so much for being here and showing us how to do that. Let's give DeLano a hand, please.
Thank you.